please join me in welcoming Mr. John Pence to give the lecture.
Thank you. All right, do you guys hear me? The mic's on. So 50 years in computer science department, I'm the first person to talk to you guys about ERP. I'm thrilled with that. So I went to UC Santa Barbara, the Gauchos, by the way. I'm sure all of you knew that. But so I don't really have a dog in this fight, but is that color scheme allowed in? All right. Oh, really? So okay. So we grandfather you in, I guess. But anyway, I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about, I think, probably one of the least understood topics in the IT industry, which is what does run all the company's infrastructure that produces all the goods and services that we take for granted and use on a daily basis, from the pads of paper you guys have to the pens and pencils you're using to what does Dell run, which is, by the way, the product that we sell and implement, which is Dynamics AX, and produce those laptops and whatnot. But underneath all basically advanced, or really anything beyond a couple $1 million company in today's world, is an ERP system. And what I'm going to try to do is explain a little bit about it, explain a little bit about what we do working in the industry in ERP, and then give you, I hope, a little bit of mental picture of how the technology is changing in ERP, because there's some really fundamental shifts in how ERP has traditionally worked and where it is headed, and kind of what we're dealing with now in terms of bringing to a business all of those information systems that, again, help them produce all the goods and services you use. So I'm going to talk about ERP, talk about those typical problems we tend to work on, talk about this modern cloud ERP architecture, which is really radically changing how we do things, and then give you that, again, a little bit mental picture of what it means to work in the industry. I guess I am a tech entrepreneur. I started the company in 1994. Before that, I worked in the IT industry for 14 years. Started as a programmer, using technologies that hopefully you guys will never have to use. Ended up, I was a CIO for 3 years for a company, Champion Products. They make the C logo activewear stuff. You guys may have some of that. And then midlife crisis out of a big company and decided to start my own company. And so did that going on 23 years now. We've been fortunate in partnering with Microsoft since 2003. So we've had a 14-year relationship with Microsoft. We've won some nice awards over the last couple of years. We work in certain industries more than others. Our biggest vertical is helping companies that, especially in the apparel, home furnishings, and retail space. So we've won several awards for things like Retail Partner of the Year and Distribution Partner of the Year. We were recently named one of the top 4 companies in the world at helping companies implement in the industrial space. And we're located right over there in Winston-Salem. We're if you ever get a chance to get to Winston-Salem, we're in kind of the hot new area around Bailey Park. So where I sit, I kind of look out on Bailey Park. Actually, we're in one of the repurposed R.J. Reynolds buildings. So we've been around for 23 years. Again, we've been working with the Microsoft product stack since 2003. And we're a global company. We, even though we're not that huge, we have 170 total employees. Most of those are consultants who work with our clients implementing ERP solutions. We have 110 of those are in the US. We have another division in Europe that helps us with our European consulting needs. We started that a few years ago. And then I just got back Sunday from our China subsidiary. It's based in Xi'an, China. We have 52 employees there in China, and they do a lot of our technical development work, as well as we're really evolving that company into a consultancy as well, implementing ERP inside mainland China. So Again, I was saying if I suddenly fall asleep, it's sudden onset jet lag killing me, but I think I'm got enough adrenaline, I'm okay. So the typical CIO of a kind of typical company is lucky to do one ERP implementation start to finish in their career. And usually their reaction after they've done one is, I never want to do that again. It's hard. It is a bet the company kind of undertaking. In kind of one fell swoop, you go into a business and really turn upside down for the better just about all the processes that operate, a large company. And it's a very high risk, very high reward sort of undertaking to do. We've done it 130 plus times now at Sunrise for a lot of different companies, and some of them that we've done it for are up here on the screen. So I've probably got more than the usual scars from doing that many ERP implementations. But again, it's one of those things where hopefully I can share a little bit about it. And then again, ask me questions, especially after the talk. I'd love to, whether you're thinking of consulting, whether you're thinking of starting a tech company, whether you're thinking about ERP as a career, I'd love to answer questions. But again, you can see we have a lot of apparel clients up there. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Patagonia at the end of the talk. They're one of our favorite clients. We've implemented, so if you guys use any Patagonia stuff, they're the outdoor t-shirts, jackets, all that kind of stuff. We've implemented all of their global infrastructure. So anywhere in the world that Patagonia operates, they use systems that we helped implement for them. So what is ERP? It's a name, it's a kludgy name, first off. It's Enterprise Resource Planning, which on its surface means absolutely nothing, and it doesn't really apply to any of the functions that are going on. It was a marketing thing that happened back in the late 80s when MRP systems became kind of a hot thing because people started automating the manufacturing process, and especially the planning of manufacturing. And the core of that is material resource planning, which is a back scheduling of the requirements in manufacturing. And it's a very hard technical problem in the middle of the manufacturing process. And when this thing expanded to a broader scope to run all the aspects of a business, they kind of borrowed from that MRP name, which had some rationale to it. Material resource planning was the activity you were doing. And they tacked, as we're wont to do in technology, we tacked an enterprise on the front of it and called it Enterprise Resource Planning. But it doesn't really make a lot of sense in that context. So it was poorly named from the get-go. But what it is a collection of stuff that runs all businesses, whether that is the manufacturing and planning and operational side of it. Think of that as the supply chain, to HR and human resources management, or supply chain, or the vendor and upstream processes. And then it runs also what a lot of people think of as ERP, which is the financial systems. And I want to spend a little bit of time on that because I think that's also a little bit of a misunderstood thing. A lot of times people think of ERP systems as financial systems, and it's just one piece of what they do. The paradigm I like to think of when I think of any kind of business and the systems that run it is it's very much like a house or a structure. And you've got to kind of think about it from a foundational point of view. What's it built on? And then how does that architecture kind of build up from that? Where's kind of the action of the ERP system? What are the roles of the various parts and pieces that go into ERP? And again, kind of thinking about constructing a dwelling, constructing some kind of building is a good paradigm. And it begins with data. So the biggest thing that ERP did, really when you back up and look at the business world of information technology, is it created a common paradigm of data. It basically defined in a fairly standardized way most of the business data that most firms use, things like orders, customers, vendors, products. All of these type of data elements used to be basically every company invented their own. And the concept of ERP started bringing kind of more of a common definition, common language, common data architecture to most business operations. And that foundation is what everything is built on top of above ERP. So at the core of all ERP systems is a very large data model. And they are very, very large. They are, again, thousands of different rows and elements, or thousands of different unique data elements that are brought together in very complicated ways to try to solve all those business problems. On top of that is the various activities of the business. And often, I kind of like to start with the manufacturing because everything sort of works off manufacturing. And today, manufacturing or globally sourcing a product are kind of the same thing. Most people who don't necessarily own plants and equipment, and we talk a lot about the decline in the manufacturing base in the US. But the reality is all those goods are still produced somewhere, and all of that production is still managed by the same companies that used to own that plant that used to be down the street or in a community here in North Carolina. That plant just now happens to be possibly in China, Philippines, somewhere in Africa possibly, maybe down in South America. But the management, the decision making, the tracking, especially in where modern information technology has evolved, actually looks exactly the same as if you own that plant. So most companies that, for example, Patagonia doesn't own any of their own actual manufacturing, yet they manage their supply chain as if they did own all of that manufacturing. So from an information point of view, again, that where those products come from, and within manufacturing is things like product design, product development, engineering, product engineering, all of that is encompassed in that manufacturing discipline. Those products then get managed through very large and elaborate product order entry systems or order processing systems. And this is one of the areas that has evolved the most in business over the last 20 years. Used to be most companies had one way to go to market. They sold via wholesale channels to retailers, or beginning in the late 90s, e-commerce companies came about, and companies like Amazon were a fairly one-dimensional e-commerce type business. What's happened today is that companies go to market in all kinds of ways simultaneously. So they go to market through that e-commerce channel, and one of the biggest things we do over and over again as a company is build integrations to things like Amazon. Amazon is a huge focal point of many, many of our clients, and building that, so when you order on Amazon, if it's not an Amazon stock product, that order that you place on Amazon is actually being dropped through to the order processing system of that vendor that's actually supplying that product, for example. They often also have their own stores and still go through a traditional type of retail. They often are doing that across many, many geographies. And so one of the things that's happened in this order processing arena is managing that inventory problem, managing how to utilize your resources across all those options and all those geographies has come enormously complicated from where it was 30 years ago. And when we talk about intelligent businesses or transforming businesses with data, a lot of times what they're really talking about is how does this customer demand and the supply of inventory intersect in the best possible way for businesses. And then the whole distribution problem. Where should I ship it out of? How to most effectively ship it? In a global economy with globally sourced products, shipping costs are often 30-40% of the total product costs. So how do we do that in an effective way? All of that's happening through the ERP system. Transportation routing, managing customs duties and tariffs, all of that international business is actually being controlled and managed through the ERP system. And then the workforce management. This has gone from really zero to a huge thing now as the economy has evolved toward a more services-oriented economy, and especially in places like healthcare, human resource management has become a huge aspect of overall ERP implementations. And companies are trying to optimize and make sure they have the right mix of human resources within a business. Again, if you think of a very large hospital complex, I think in Winston-Salem, Wake Forest Baptist Hospital is our biggest employer. And I saw one time they have 28 different types of nurses that that they have to manage that workforce, and that's a certified skill that if you aren't certified to be that type of nurse, you can't do that work. So that's an example of what human resource management does. We do a lot of this internally because we have very specific needs to staff our projects, and our human resources group has a large system that they use to manage that process. Customer resource management is another aspect now of ERP. And this is how do you manage acquiring and then caring for new customers. This is another thing we do a lot of in Sunrise. But this has gone from something that wasn't considered part of traditional business systems to something now that's kind of front and center in most of our implementations, is including with that traditional supply chain stuff, that management of the customer integration, so that we know who we're trying to get as new customers, we know that they've become a customer, we know what the life cycle of their history with us as a customer. Again, all part of this dull and boring. I haven't even gotten to accounting. So this is all stuff that didn't even have to do with accounting. Okay, financials. So I finally got there. This is at the center of all of these systems. One of the things that ERP brought to businesses is the ability to automatically integrate from a financial perspective all of the physical activity that was going on in the business, like shipping an order or producing a new product and that type of thing. But I think sometimes this has been overcomplicated in what this really is within the overall platform of ERP. What the financial systems are is it's operating the scoreboard for the business. And that's the mental picture to have in an ERP system, what the financial systems do. If you think of a football game with the scoreboards on each end of the field, the activity of the business is the game itself. And the scoreboards, the financial systems, and there's two of them. One's called a profit and loss statement and one's called a balance sheet, are keeping score of the game. And they're providing the people who are watching the game with information about what's happening within that activity. And essentially saying two different things. The profit and loss is saying, are we winning or losing? And the balance sheet is saying, how much are we worth as a business? That's the fundamental purpose of those two scoreboards. We used to have scoreboards that lagged the game by a long way. Scoreboards used to lag the game by about a month and a half, and that was for a good business. If you could close your books 2 weeks after you finished a month, you would now get an updated scoreboard that could kind of tell you what happened in the game last month. Where all of this is going now is that scoreboard's real time, just like you would think you would want a real-time scoreboard. And so that you can start making financial understanding of what's happening yesterday, this month so far, that type of thing. So that real-time integration of financial information and then bringing context to it, because it's hard to bring that kind of real-time context sometimes to financial information, is one of the trends right now in business that we deal with a lot. So that books close almost automatically once a month ends. And the last thing about a typical ERP implementation is that we bring up always is systems integration. So there's always other things that a business has to talk to anytime we implement a big ERP system. I mentioned Amazon as one. On average, we integrate to 14 other systems on each ERP implementation. And those are anything from a 3PL warehouse, like say a UPS might be operating, say in Hong Kong or somewhere like that, to lots of different e-commerce platforms. Typical average for us is to integrate to 3 different e-commerce platforms in any one ERP implementation. It's one of our hardest problems because so much data moves back and forth between an e-commerce platform. There's banking integrations. There are customs and duty integrations where we are talking real time to some form of import-export applications. Transportation, global transportation is a real-time data collection process, so understanding where things are is often a big integration that we build. So that's the house. That's a typical house and the typical functions that ERP kind of brings. And one of the things that again, as an IT person, when you implement these systems, and this was something that I learned back when I was a CIO, when I first got to be a CIO, the president basically sat me down and said, all right, John, I want you doing one of two things, and if you're not, something's wrong. You need to either be growing sales or taking cost out of my company. And if anything else you're doing is somehow missing the point. I was like, okay, yes, sir. But he's right, and I got that advice a long, long time ago, but it's never failed me. And it's really the way you should always look at that type of activity is, are you doing something to increase revenue some way or another, acquire more customers, sell more stuff to people, be able to handle scenarios, or in some way or another, are you doing things with IT and with the systems that allow you to do more with less? And that is the central purpose of all of this stuff, is to enable that type of physical reality to get better. And that's what we do. A key point I want you to take away is, if you want to do something better in a business today of any size, the only way you can do that is to change the systems in that company. You can run around with as many PowerPoints as you want. You can do all the strategic counseling you want, and nothing happens. Not a thing happens till you change those computer systems, because they are what govern the activity of every business. And so if you want to make a difference, if you want a warehouse to run better, you want to use inventory better, you want to be smarter about your financials, you want to do something new that the competitor's never done with pricing, you're not going to be able to do anything without figuring out how to do it through the computer systems that run the business. That's exactly why I like doing this, by the way. That's what my passion has always been, how to make normal, real stuff better. And you can't do it in business without going through the computer systems. The IT department basically holds businesses hostage. And often they don't understand how important they actually are to the business. And I think more and more and more we're seeing IT leaders move up to being true C-level executives now, because there's more and more recognition in the world that that is how you improve the business, is actually through the technology. So again, if that's an important point, and something you guys ought to be thinking about for future careers too, is you can absolutely become a CEO through a career in IT, I believe, nowadays. It used to be hard. When I first started working, that would have been, people would have really doubted that. But I don't believe that people doubt that anymore. So what do we do for clients? What's the typical thing we're being asked to do? So our clients typically have various problems that they're coming to Sunrise and saying, we think as part of this ERP implementation, we want you to make us better in some way. And typically they're asking us around certain kinds of problems. One problem is often they've started up some new line of business that doesn't work in their old systems. They've started some new way of doing business or some new product line that they just can't make work in the old way that they've designed their systems. Often they've opened up a new channel, and this has probably been one of the biggest things that we've worked on over the last 10 years is a company that historically was a wholesaler has now become a company that's dominated by e-commerce and their own retail. And those have completely different business processes, operating challenges, all of that kind of stuff. And so again, they're looking for their systems to enable what they're trying to do, because without it, they can't become a good e-commerce company. You can't become a good retailer. A lot of times, they're going into global markets. The barrier to doing business globally, I mean, we have 170 people and we're a global company. There's no excuse to not be a global company in today's world. You can do it, but it is complicated. It means you have to have legal entities everywhere you operate. You have to follow the rules of each company or each country. You have to do very precise accounting of where things are moving in and out. So it makes things a lot more complicated. So it's easier than ever to do it, but you need good intelligence to be able to do it, or you get in a lot of trouble. So again, we're asked to deal with that problem a lot. A lot of times we're being asked to help with the customer experience. in some way? How do I make it easier for a client to work with us? We are implementing right now a really, really sophisticated product for Patagonia called distributed order management, where a customer can, if they're at a retail store at Patagonia and something is missing, we're implementing the ability for somebody to stand there with a mobile device talking to that person and analyze the entire supply chain of Patagonia and figure out the best possible way to get that person something they're interested in. Whether that's coming from another store, coming from a warehouse that's regional, or knowing that it's on a boat, but it's going to be a couple weeks before we can get it. And what we're trying to do is make it easy for that person to get an accurate answer and then make sure that answer actually follows through and happens. But it's enormously complicated. We're evaluating literally hundreds of thousands of scenarios while that person is just standing there with the sales associate next to them in the store and trying to figure out the right answer to give them. And it seems simple, but it's actually one of the most cutting-edge business problems anybody is dealing with. And Patagonia and Sunrise and Microsoft, we're all partnering on this. So again, usually what's happening is the most common thing, though, that we're being asked to do is improve the supply chain. This is where most companies, in some way, shape, or form, are hurting. And often, what we kind of pivot and talk to about clients is a lot of our customers are brands. So they own brands, a Marc Jacobs, a Patagonia, Swell water bottles, people like that. I don't know if that's a Swell right there. It looks similar, but. And one of the things we often talk to our clients about is the brands don't compete as much as the supply chains compete, especially long term. Especially long term. If you're going to be a profitable, sustainable business, then you have to have outstanding supply chains. Because that's where all your money goes when you make stuff. It goes into that supply chain. All your real bets happen in the supply chain. And a lot of times, again, not well understood. But making that supply chain more competitive is what really sustains companies and then allows them to do all those kind of innovative things. So this is just some market data, but again, when you talk to businesses, one of the things that they all pretty much agree on is the world's gotten a lot more complicated. Our supply chains have gotten a lot more complicated, a lot more choices, a lot more variation, a lot more different geographies involved, and it's making things break, which is that 54% had some negative effect on sales revenue. What that means is something screwed up, we didn't get the product in time, and now somebody's pissed off. That's 54% is having that effect. And it's happening often because information is breaking down, and that's, again, part of the big problem that we tend to work on in ERP consulting. So again, things like late supply, shipping delays, excess inventory. For every customer that's mad, usually there's an equal and opposite problem happening in some other product where you have too much and now you have the CEO mad. Before I became a CIO, I was actually running the inventory planning and distribution business for Sara Lee Corporation, and so I quickly found out that my job was either getting yelled at over shortages or getting yelled at over having too much, but it never was being patted on the head that I got anything just right. So it was always one thing or the other. And again, there's a feeling, I think, often that there's a lack of control, especially in operating global businesses. And one strategy that businesses followed for a long time when they went international was to create independent divisions in each country, often operating their own ERP systems or their own local systems. And what that led to is a very chaotic environment of mismatched data, lack of ability of really having visibility to what's going on when you start trying to manage a global process. And I've got a slide of a real-world example of a client who mapped that in their business and how kind of out of control it got. So here's the kind of stuff we do. Again, we're implementing all that plumbing, and that all has to work, but really what clients are asking us to come in and do is help them with these kind of business problems of getting better. And so what I wanted to do today a little bit is give you a few examples of that type of thing. So late supply, what are we trying to do with late supply? Well, we're trying to figure out where people are impacted by that. Where's the demand going to be missed? So in terms of what's late, we do often type of business intelligence analysis like this, where we're trying to understand what geographies are being impacted. We're trying to understand what customers are being impacted, and also bring context to this so that we can tell businesses where the worst of those problems are. Because there's always problems. Like, that's one of the problems with any big business, is there's so much noise that the significant gets lost in the trivial. Patagonia at any one point in time has roughly 60,000 different products, just as an example, and they're pretty typical of our client base. So one company is trying to deal with 60,000 different things simultaneously. So that's a lot, and you really need to have some mechanism of filtering out the wheat from the chaff a little bit. So good example is that. Again, big impact supply issues. This is where that supply is late and what is getting impacted. Who might be affected by it? What vendors are causing the lateness? How do I diagnose and do something? And again, a lot of the point of this is do something about it. Try to figure out solutions to it. Demand shaving. This is one of the things we work on a lot. We're short. We know we're going to be short. And we have a mixed type of demand out there. We have Walmart, who, you might imagine is a very demanding customer. They want a lot of stuff, but our e-commerce customers want a lot of stuff, and our own retail stores need a lot of stuff. Who gets it? What's an equitable way of trying to deal that problem out? That's a really, really non-trivial problem. There's no right answer. There's just a lot of least worst cases you're trying to figure out. But doing that intelligently may be the difference between staying a vendor at Walmart or keeping your own e-commerce, or keeping your customers on your e-commerce site. And one of the things that varies in that is Walmart may have told you exactly what they want, but you have no idea what the e-commerce customers are going to want, because when they place an order, you ship it in 2 hours, so you never have an order bank to deal with in e-commerce. So you're balancing a forecast that you might have versus hard orders from a mean and vocal, customer. How do you do that? You got to do it. If you just cave in, you're probably over promising to Walmart. Can't over protect necessarily. So again, a lot of this stuff is helping businesses. This demand shaving is a name we have for that intelligent allocation of inventory. If we're going to be short, how do we allocate out the shortness? So that's all part of, again, ERP implementations. It's a lot more than financial systems. Sales push. This is the flip side. I got too much. What am I going to do? How can I solve that? Where can I push this stuff out? Can I lower prices somewhere? Can I add it to a retail assortment? Maybe I'm not carrying it in my stores. Can I add it to my stores? Can we feature it on the e-commerce site? That's one of the best ways right now our clients get rid of excess inventory, by the way, is manipulating the e-commerce site. Manipulating the prices, manipulating the featuring of different things. A lot of times when you see that deal going on in an e-commerce site, it's because they have too much of something. And again, it usually is a really good deal because they are trying to get rid of something that they hope to sell for a lot more money. But we facilitate that. We help with that decision-making process. So that's one big way kind of things that we do. Another thing we really do, frankly, is come in and remodel the house. So a lot of times the house starts with a very nice and pristine design, and over 100 years ends up looking more like this, where you've got a hodgepodge of stuff added to it. Somewhere along the way you lost any sort of semblance of architectural control of the thing, and before long you got something that looks like this with a lot of rusting cars in the yard to boot. And a lot of times we have clients that's the problem they're asking us to solve. A lot of times this has happened through acquisition, where a company has bought lots of other companies, each of them bringing their version of information systems together, and They've attempted to merge all those information systems, but again, often what it does is it ends up with a house that looks like this and not a very functional house. So they're asking us to straighten that out. Again, very complicated problem because often it's actually multiple businesses within a business that you have to migrate. So this is not my slide. This was a client slide. This was a very large cosmetics firm, actually, also with their main production in North Carolina. But and they mapped what their global IT portfolio looked like and came up with this, that they had 531 different business units, distinctly all using different methodologies around things like currencies and chargebacks, how they map things to ledger. Every one of those black lines is an integration from one of those dots to another dot that was happening within their systems. They had followed a global expansion where every country had their own unique system. They didn't follow a process where they controlled product identification. So they had a scenario where the exact same thing was sold in 30 different countries under 30 completely different product numbers. So they didn't know how much red lipstick they were selling globally, for example. So they asked us via new ERP implementation to help them solve that problem. So we basically mapped how to step by step get them in a rational way because it's more than you can do at once. So you can't do this in just one global full sweep. So you have to have some kind of rational strategy about how you're going to bring them from where they are to where we need to go, especially because a big part of that was rationalizing all their data. And so we mapped them to a single global architecture with single global product catalogs. We figured out how we were going to stage through that global rollout and work them through that whole huge house remodeling that involved me. I think there was 30 some different divisions in that plan. So those are kind of that's what clients hire us to do when we go into a company and help them with ERP. One of the things that is really fundamentally changing this architecture and how we solve these problems is the rapid movement of business to a cloud architecture. Sunrise, we've already done that, so we don't own a single server other than, I think, a print server that is still in our office just to run printers and peripherals in the office. But otherwise, we don't have any infrastructure. We pay for, I think, somewhere around 180 different servers from a cloud point of view that are all running in the Microsoft Azure space. So we use a lot of compute cycles for a lot of different things. But that includes China, that includes Europe. Everything about the way we operate globally in Sunrise is operating off a cloud architecture. So again, we've gotten rid of any physical device that we need to use. And it means that all I have to do is have an internet connection and things work fine. So I happen to have one here. This is probably the kiss of death because I'm going to demo, and like all my sales guys would say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. But anyway, so this is the same business intelligence system that I was showing you with some screenshots, but this is live. This is just running through a cloud application. And again, we have various forms of supply chain information here. And this is the type of thing we're putting together for clients. It uses a new cloud-based business intelligence system called Power BI. It's got wonderful context filtering to it, so you can do that kind of, how do I separate the wheat from the chaff? How do I do that type of stuff? It runs on any type of platform or device. And the nice thing about all this kind of thing is it really changes the paradigm about what I can do where. I don't have to be in the office. I don't have to be at a certain type of device or connected to a certain thing. I can be anywhere on a mobile device, and I can do anything. And I can do this for this type of software. I can do it if we're We're talking about our internal project management. So this is just a quick glance, but this is how we manage all our projects. So this is a business intelligence system also built on Power BI that we use to manage all our projects, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But again, it allows businesses to do things in a fluid way and independent of geography that is very nice to be able to do. And it's really changing the way you think about stuff, because that house example I was giving you, back when ERP was relatively new in the 90s, that was more like fortresses, like castles was a better way to think about it than houses, with a limited number of gated doorways in and out, and then all that data that is underpinning that was basically hidden inside the castle for the castle's use. But it was very difficult to get in and out of that castle. And if you wanted to add some new piece of functionality to the castle, you had to get the stonemason out and build a new turret. That's pretty much how it worked. In the cloud architecture, though, what's happening is all of those same functions in ERP are being deconstructed into cloud services with an independent platform for their data that's starting to allow you to think about more assembling services together to accomplish those business transactions than that kind of monolithic way. And that's exactly what we're living through right now in our implementation. So 80% of our consulting cycles right now in Sunrise are going to pure cloud implementations of ERP. And 2 years ago, it was 0. So this is a very rapid change that basically businesses have become very, very comfortable with this concept of a cloud. One of the biggest drivers and reasons for that is security reasons. If all the big hacks, and by the way, this Equifax thing is the worst of the worst by far. I mean, that thing is, I really feel like that's going to undermine the whole Social Security as a thing. I mean, we're going to have to find a better ID system, but private enterprises are realizing I can't provide security that's secure enough to prevent my data from being hacked. It's just not really possible. And so there's going to be very few entities in the world, people like Amazon and Microsoft and whatnot, that can run robust enough data centers and platform infrastructures to really protect things better than what any private business can really do. The governments can do it too, but it's enormously complicated today to be able to do it. So again, we're moving hard to cloud, and cloud is allowing things to happen at warp speed in terms of kind of business models and rethinking. And I wanted to share an example. Like I said, I just got back from China. I go every single year, and one of the things that's mind-boggling to me about China is every year I go, and every year there's like completely radically different stuff. Their uptake of things is much more rapid, I feel like, than the US. And so a year ago, there was, like, bikes had died in China. Like, it's unbelievable, the traffic. It's crazy. And lots of motor scooters and stuff. But bikes that, say, 10 or 15 years ago, tons of bikes, it dropped to very few bikes. I came this year, everywhere. Bikes everywhere. Unbelievable numbers of bikes. And what has happened is this bike ride-sharing ecosystem has evolved in China just like that. And it is a cloud-based business model that basically allows you to grab any bike laying around anywhere, hop on it, scan your QR code. So it doesn't matter what bike, by the way. If it's just sitting there, you can borrow it if you're a member of that rideshare service, and there's tons of them competing. Shein, where I go in China, there's like 5 major one of these. They all have their color, by the way, so you can, you're a member of the yellow bike club, you get the yellow bike. But you just walk up, use the all ubiquitous social media app in China, which is WeChat. How many people here use WeChat, by the way? Okay, all right. So WeChat runs the universe in China, I think, but it's like everything we think of as social media sort of combined into one thing. But WeChat provides an automatic integration to all the different bike apps. When you scan their QR code, WeChat figures out, oh, okay, you're talking to Mobike. I'm going to tunnel through to their site automatically drops it off. You use WePay to pay for it. Costs 1 RMB an hour. The way the app works, you scan it. If you're a member, it says, great, here's your code. You key in a 4-digit or 5-digit code. Unlocks the lock. This thing is a lock right here. Unlocks it. You hop on your bike, take it wherever you want to go. Wherever you get there, you just drop it. There's a lot of them laying in bushes and stuff. It's like typical, kind of chaotic, but more often than not, it looks like this. Scan it out, say I'm done, figures out how much time, also knows where that bike is, knows what route you just took, and then charges you. And again, it's 1 RMB an hour, which is roughly 15 cents an hour to use a bike. I think most of the clubs charge 300 RMB to join, so there's like a little bit of an upfront. It's 6.8 to a US dollar, so you can kind of do that mental math. But yeah. And I saw one driving in. Yeah. So China started, by the way, this way, and for a bunch of years they tried to make the ride-sharing work, and we have this in Winston too, which is a point-to-point physical architecture sort of thing where you got to check it out of a bike rack, take it to another bike rack, check it back in. Never worked. Absolutely failed business model. But this web service model where you can grab, again, a social media service out of WeChat, a payment service also out of WeChat, automatically linked to all kinds of competing services. So again, every bike color is a different company there. And then the payment process is happening. So what's happened is a real physical business is assembled out of these web services. And I just, again, fascinating to me how rapid. In Xi'an, I didn't ever see this, but my sister-in-law said 1.2 million bikes now on this ride sharing just in the city of Xi'an. So, and I believe it, because they are everywhere. I mean, it was amazing how many of these things there are. But from virtually zero a year ago. So things are happening very, very rapidly. And again, this is just an example of how you kind of scan it, and that's using the actual rideshare app. Most of the people I saw using it were going through WeChat, not actually didn't even have the bike apps on there. So the ERP solution that we implement is going down this exact same path. We're deconstructing that castle into lots of different web services that we're then bringing together. And so underneath that is some sort of platform like Azure, but on top of it, you remember that data block that lives down in the basement? That's now a common data model that Microsoft is publishing. They're actually saying, hey, world, here's the data model for our whole ERP infrastructure. Build stuff on it. We're going to make it a thing, independent. We're going to literally take it out of the castle. We're going to publish it. We're going to encourage all kinds of developers to build stuff on it, including possibly competing ERP systems. They're giving away the hardest thing about an ERP system actually is figuring out that data model. But what they're really trying to do is encourage lots of other app development that uses some aspect of it. Payment processing, bank integration, eCommerce stuff. You can start kind of mentally seeing how this enables a lot of rapid business innovation to happen. And then they're modularizing and starting to break up the various ERP components, the traditional stuff around operations and finance, which is all that supply chain. They're breaking up things like customer service and sales, which are various concepts around, again, that customer relationship management. Talent is their HRM module, so they're breaking it into a service. Again, talks to the common data model. You can use talent with other ERP solutions. So again, as long as you're in that cloud service-based thing, you can start mix and matching a lot of stuff. So again, you used to have to implement your castle. Now there's going to be a lot of various combinations of things you can do for companies that work with other castle components, essentially. And then they're surrounding it with all kinds of stuff that you can tie into out of the cloud. So there's services for business intelligence. Many of our clients spent as much on business intelligence, independent, server-based business intelligence solutions as they spent on all the other business transaction stuff. Now you virtually just get it. It's just embedded. It's a service. There is a charge for it, but again, it's so easy to use. Microsoft's trying to do this Office kind of concept, by the way, where they give so much stuff away, they just make it so compelling. But so business intelligence built in. And business intelligence, by the way, built in on the actual data model itself, not off some kind of data warehousing concept. So data warehouses, by the way, are like the boat anchors of businesses. They start out as a good idea, and then they fill up with so much concrete that after a while you can't change the business because the data warehouse is so cumbersome to modify. So one of the things that, again, is kind of a cutting edge thing we're dealing with over and over again is kind of going away from that traditional data warehousing concept back to figuring out more on the real-time business information. And it's harder because you don't have a lot of the cutoffs and a lot of the logic that you kind of can build in to a data warehouse. But it adapts and it lets you move forward as a business much more rapidly. Machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, that's what's under that Cortana intelligence thing. Again, we're using machine intelligence in that distributed order management example that I talked about with Patagonia. So again, it's just a service you can pull in, do stuff with. IoT, Internet of Things, lots and lots of applications for that. Machine data collection, preventative maintenance, transportation tracking, all that kind of stuff uses that IoT types of concepts. And then just again, all wrappered into that kind of ecosystem. This is what is kind of modern business is heading for, is operating on a collection of web services and cloud-based services.